Have you ever been speaking to somebody and you got the sense that they were just not listening to you? Well, if that happens, it could be a sign that you're either saying too much or what you're saying is not relevant enough to that person. When I'm listening to a symphony of music, for example, I'm hearing every note that's played, but I'm not listening to every note that's played. If the composer's any good, they will help me out as a listener. They'll tell me which notes are more important than which other notes. They'll bring out certain notes in the melody, for example. They'll make certain notes more prominent than others. When you're speaking to somebody, you are sort of the composer of the conversation. And as such, it is your responsibility to help your listener know what's important and what's not. Now, one thing you can do is just say less when you're speaking. The less you say, the more people tend to listen. And the more you say, conversely, the less people will tend to listen. Or rather, they won't know exactly what to listen for because you're just saying too much. So in conversation, I think it's important to strive for clarity and brevity. And this applies for all conversation, not just one-on-one conversation, but when you're on stage, for example, if you're a public speaker. Make sure that every word is intentional and that there are no useless words. That's a quote from Strunk and White. They wrote a really good book on style in the context of writing. There should be no useless words when you're speaking. If you want people to stop zoning out when you're talking, it is very important to always keep the conversation relevant to that person. Dale Carnegie says to speak in terms of the other person's interests. And we all know people who do the opposite, right? People who keep talking and talking about themselves. They always bring the conversation back to themselves. You don't want to be that person. You should always strive to keep the conversation relevant to the other person. So for example, if I am having car problems and I'm talking to a friend, I could say, "Oh man, I've been having car problems lately, just one thing after another," and then launch into the car problems. But if I wanted to keep the conversation relevant to the person that I'm talking to, I could preface what I'm about to say with, "Man, I've been having car problems, one thing after another. Has that ever happened to you before?" And then give them a chance to share something from their life that's relevant to the conversation you're about to launch into. That way, you're keeping them engaged because you're keeping the conversation relevant to their life. We all know that children tend to have a pretty short attention span, right? If you're talking to a child, they're often easily distracted. Well, I believe that as adults, we never quite lengthen our attention span. We just get better at pretending to listen. So when you're talking to an adult, assume that they have the attention span of a child and keep the conversation relevant to them and as concise as you can. I think it's useful to think of attention as a scarce resource. We all think of money as a scarce resource, right? There's limited money. But fewer among us think of time as a scarce resource, and especially somebody else's time. So if you have somebody else's time, somebody else's attention in a conversation, cherish it and value it like the scarce resource that it is. I think that if you take this approach to conversations, it will transform how you communicate. You will start to respect people's time more. And in so doing, I believe, through the law of reciprocity, other people that you're talking to will also start to value your time more because they feel that their time is being valued. So that's just a thought that came to mind with regards to conversation. If you feel like people are not listening to you when you're speaking, try to keep the conversation as relevant to them as you can and as concise as you can.